imagine for a second a global leaderboard.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. So we usually rank countries by, how big their economy is, or maybe by the sheer brute force of their military might.
Yeah, the classic GDP and tanks approach.
Exactly. But what if we completely changed the rules? What if we ranked them by how well they actually treat their people?
That changes the game entirely.
It really does. And what if, just as someone is about to win that new game, we throw in one more massive twist and ask, yes, but did you destroy the planet to do it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is the ultimate stress test.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the global superpower in that specific scenario isn't the U.S.
No.
And it's not China either.
Definitely not.
The answer to that mystery is actually Spain.
Which is just wild to think about.
I mean, think about that for a second. Welcome back to another custom-tailored deep dive created just for you. Today, we are digging into a massive stack of data.
Oh, yeah. We have a really dense, highly detailed 15-page research report today.
Right, and it's based entirely on United Nations Development Program data, the UNDP. It's titled Dimensions and Shadows of Human Development, 1990 to 2023 Global and Spain Deep Research Report.
It's a mouthful, but the data inside is incredible.
It really is. So our mission today is to figure out if our traditional definition of, development is just completely broken in an era of climate crisis and inequality.
And we're going to use Spain's quiet little revolution as our ultimate case study for that. It is great to be here to unpack this with you.
So glad you're here. Where do we even start with this?
Well, to really conceptualize what we're talking about today, I want to adjust the visual framing behind me for a second.
All right, let's do it.
So imagine a clean, stark white space. Hovering on the left side is a slightly, tarnished standard issue metal. And it's engraved with 28th place.
28th place. Okay, not bad, but not exactly front page news.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That represents Spain's current rank in traditional human development. It's highly respectable, but it doesn't turn heads.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, on the right side of the space, shining brightly, is an upgraded, pristine metal engraved with second place.
Whoa. Second place globally.
Globally. And connecting these two metals is a giant, glowing red question mark.
I love that visual, because how does a nation leak from 28th to 2nd in the blink of an eye?
Well, the answer lies entirely in how we measure human progress. We're going to look at the engine of development today through 4 specific gears.
Okay, lay them out for me.
First is the HDI, the Human Development Index.
Right, the classic.
Then the IHDI, which adjusts for inequality. Third is the GII, the Gender Inequality Index.
Okay.
And finally, the game changer, the PHDI, the Planetary Pressures Adjusted Index. That's the ultimate stress test for modern civilization.
That red question mark visual cuts right to the core of the mystery. But before we figure out how Spain crossed that gap, we really need to establish the ground we're all standing on.
Yeah, we need a baseline.
Exactly, because if you spend like 5 minutes doom scrolling on your phone right now, you'd probably think humanity is in a free fall back to the Dark Ages.
Oh, absolutely. The news cycle is brutal.
But this UNDP data tells a completely different, stubbornly optimistic story about our global baseline over the last 3 decades. So let's start with that first gear, the HDI.
The Human Development Index, yeah.
Right. For anyone who hasn't dug into macroeconomics lately, this is essentially the scorecard we use when we realize that just looking at a country's bank account, its GDP, is a terrible way to judge the actual quality of life.
That is the exact historical context that birthed the HDI in the early 90s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Economists like Mahbub al-Haq and Amartya Sen, they realized that a nation could have this skyrocketing GDP driven by, say, oil extraction.
Or hyper-industrialization, right?
Exactly. While its actual citizens were, dying young, remaining illiterate, and living in extreme poverty.
So all that money wasn't actually reaching the people.
Right. So the HDI was created to force the world to measure capabilities, not just cash. It combines 3 fundamental dimensions of human existence.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is a long and healthy life. Mathematically, that's measured by life expectancy at birth.
Makes sense. You can't enjoy wealth if you aren't alive.
Exactly. Second is knowledge, which they measure by a combination of how many years of schooling children are expected to get and the actual mean years of schooling adults currently have.
Okay, so health and education. And the third?
The third is a decent standard of living, which is measured by gross national income per capita.
So it's basically asking, are you alive? Are you educated enough to understand the world? And do you have enough money in your pocket to make actual choices?
That is a perfect summary.
And when you combine those three things into a single global scorecard from 1990 to 2023, the trend line isn't flat. It's like a massive upward slope.
The transformation is undeniable. I mean, in 1990, the global HDI was just 0.608.
0.608. Okay, what does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, in the language of the index, that number represents a world struggling with medium to low development. It was a world where vast swaths of the global population lacked basic sanitation, where preventable diseases completely dictated lifespans, and where higher education was an extreme luxury for the very few.
Right. But by 2023, where are we at?
That global average grew to 0.756.
Which is a 24.3% increase.
Yeah.
So in just 3 decades, the baseline of human existence improved by roughly a quarter. That's huge.
It is. We are talking about hundreds of millions of people crossing the threshold out of extreme poverty.
That's incredible.
We're talking about global literacy campaigns finally taking root, the massive expansion of public health infrastructure, and the mitigation of childhood diseases driving life expectancy way up.
So the machinery of global development, despite all its flaws and everything we see on social media, has been remarkably effective at raising that foundational floor.
It really has.
But looking at the data visualization for that 33-year upward slope, there is an unavoidable, jagged red line pointing straight down.
Yes, around 2020.
Right at 2020, the line doesn't just flatten, it breaks. The global HDI fell from 0.745 down to 0.742.
Which is a historic anomaly.
See, that's what I want to ask about, because just looking at the math, a drop from 0.745 to 0.742, I mean, 0.003 feels incredibly small. It looks like a rounding error.
Right, on paper it looks tiny.
So why does the report flag this as a, quote, historic regression? Why is that tiny fraction of a point so catastrophic?
Well, to understand the magnitude of that drop, you have to remember that progress on this scale is incredibly difficult to achieve, and normally it's extremely resilient.
Sure.
Think about it. For 30 years, through regional wars, the dot-com bust, the 2008 global financial crisis, through all of that, the HDI kept crawling upward.
It never stopped.
Right. 2020 was the first time in recent history that the global index actually moved backward.
Like a marathon runner who has never stopped moving forward for 30 years, suddenly stumbling and taking a step back. It's not about the distance of the fall, it's the break in momentum.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't a rounding error. It was a systemic shock that hit all three pillars of development simultaneously.
Oh, because of COVID.
Yes. The COVID-19 pandemic caused global life expectancy to literally shorten. That's the health pillar.
Right.
At the exact same time, schools were shuttered globally, meaning the accumulation of knowledge for a whole generation of children simply stopped.
The education pillar.
And of course, global supply chains completely froze, wiping out incomes.
So all three pillars just took a massive hit all at once. That makes sense? Because like the 2008 financial crisis was a massive hit to income, but schools stayed open.
Exactly.
And life expectancy didn't plummet in 2008. The pandemic was a simultaneous attack on health, wealth, and education.
And it really exposed the fragility of those systems.
When you put it like that, I want you, the listener, to just think back to your own life in 2020.
Yeah, it was tough for everyone.
That tiny, like 0.003 statistical dip isn't just math. It represents the collective trauma we all went through. You know, the anxiety over isolated grandparents, the absolute chaos of trying to manage remote learning for your kids, the sudden evaporation of job security.
It's billions of interrupted lives captured in a single downward tick.
Exactly.
And it reveals an uncomfortable truth about human development, which is that progress isn't an inevitable law of physics.
Right. It doesn't just happen on its own.
No, it is a structure that we build.
Mm-hmm.
And as 2020 proved, it is a structure that can be incredibly fragile if it isn't maintained properly. Which actually brings us to the most dangerous thing about the numbers we've discussed so far.
Averages.
Averages, yes.
We've established that the world is getting better on average, up 24.3% since 1990. But an average is like a mathematical cloak. It hides the extreme.
It hides so much.
Like if a billionaire and a person experiencing homelessness are standing in an elevator together, on average, they're both incredibly wealthy.
Right. But that average means absolutely nothing to the person sleeping on the street.
Exactly. So who is actually enjoying this global progress and who is being left behind?
To answer that, we have to transition to the second gear of our analysis today, the IHDI.
The Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index.
Right. This is where the UN statisticians take that beautiful, optimistic global average and apply a very harsh reality check.
I love how the report frames this as an inequality discount or a development loss.
It's a great way to think about it. The standard HDI looks at a nation's potential, the total volumes of health, education, and wealth. The IHDI looks at how those exact same resources are actually distributed across the population.
Let me try to break down the mechanics of this for you. Imagine you're running a business. The standard HDI is your gross revenue, all the money coming in the door.
Looks great on paper.
Looks fantastic, but the IHDI is your net profit after you pay the tax of inequality.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it.
So if a country is perfectly equal, meaning every single citizen lives to the exact same age, gets the exact same amount of schooling, and earns the exact same income, then their HDI and IHDI would be identical, right?
Exactly. There would be no inequality tax.
But the world isn't perfectly equal.
Not even close. When you apply that inequality tax to the global data, the illusion of that steady upward progress just shatters.
Okay, hit me with the numbers.
In 2023, the global HDI was 0.756. But when you adjust for inequality, that global score plummets to 0.59.
Oh, wow. So from 0.756 down to 0.59, that is a 21.9% loss.
Yes. Over a fifth of all human progress just
It
evaporates.
just vanishes. Why?
Because the gains in life expectancy, the access to elite universities, and the accumulation of wealth are disproportionately hoarded by the top percentiles of society.
The billionaires in the elevator.
Exactly.
Right.
That 21.9% loss represents millions of people who cannot access quality health care when they get sick, who are priced out of higher education, and who remain completely trapped in generational poverty despite their country's GDP growing year over year.
So it proves that the global development we celebrate is deeply asymmetrical.
The global machine is generating progress, yes, but it's terrible at distributing it.
And this is exactly where Spain steps into the spotlight.
Yes, finally.
Because while the rest of the world is losing over a fifth of its progress to this inequality tax, Spain's data tells a completely different story.
It really does. Spain's standard HDI is 0.918, which firmly places it in the very high human development category.
Very high. But what happens when we apply the tax?
Their inequality-adjusted score, their IHDI, sits at 0.819.
So the difference there, wait, Spain's inequality loss is only 10.7%?
Exactly. That is less than half the global average.
That is wild. How does a country actually achieve that mechanically? What are they doing differently to ensure the floor of their society doesn't just collapse?
It comes down to the architecture of their social contract. Spain has structurally embedded resilience into their society.
Give me an example.
Take healthcare.
Yeah.
Spain operates the Sistema Nacional de Salud. It's a universal healthcare system that is consistently ranked among the best in the world.
So everyone gets access.
Everyone. It means that access to life-saving medical treatment is a right of citizenship, not a privilege of wealth.
Right.
Therefore, the life expectancy pillar of their HDI is distributed incredibly evenly across all income brackets. A wealthy executive in Madrid and a working-class farmer in Andalusia both have access to exceptional care.
So they've essentially removed the wealth variable from the health equation entirely.
Precisely. And they apply similar logic to education. They have a really robust, highly subsidized public university system.
So you don't need a massive trust fund to get a degree.
Exactly. A student's ability to achieve those expected years of schooling isn't strictly gated by their parents' ability to pay exorbitant tuition fees.
That's huge.
Furthermore, Spain has strong labor protections and social safety nets. They might not have the highest concentration of ultra-wealthy tech billionaires in Europe, but they have engineered a system where the punishment for falling on hard times isn't absolute destitution.
I love that. The punishment for falling on hard times isn't destitution. If we go back to the business analogy, think of two different companies, all right?
Right.
Company A has a CEO raking in tens of millions in bonuses, while the thousands of warehouse workers make minimum wage. They have zero job security and absolutely no health insurance.
Sounds familiar.
Right. If you just look at the average income of Company A, it looks like a wildly successful place to work.
The average is sky high.
But Company B takes a different approach. The CEO makes a solid salary, sure, but the profits are heavily reinvested into comprehensive healthcare, retirement matching, and continuing education for every single employee.
Yeah.
If a massive economic recession hits, Company A is going to shatter. The workers have no buffer. But Company B is going to survive because the organization is structurally sound from the bottom up. Spain is Company B.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. Spain is Company B. Their development isn't just a fragile veneer of wealth at the top. It is deeply rooted in the population.
Which explains why their inequality loss is only 10.7%.
It does. But we can't fully understand equality without addressing the most historically entrenched divide in human society.
Ah,
We
yes.
have to look at the fault line between men and women,
Which brings us to the third gear of our analysis, the GII.
the Gender Inequality Index.
Right. Because it's one thing to distribute wealth evenly among social classes, but does that equality actually hold up across the gender divide? How does the UN even measure something as complex as gender inequality?
The GII is an incredibly rigorous metric because it doesn't just look at one facet of life. It measures inequality across three distinct dimensions.
Wait, what's the first one?
First is reproductive health, which relies heavily on the maternal mortality ratio and adolescent birth rates.
Okay, so tracking if women are surviving childbirth.
Exactly. The logic here is that if a society cannot protect the lives of women during childbirth, foundational equality is just impossible.
That makes total sense. What's the second dimension?
Second is empowerment.
How do you measure empowerment?
They measure it by the proportion of parliamentary seats occupied by women and the proportion of adult females with at least some secondary education.
So, political power and schooling.
Right. And the third dimension is economic status, which is expressed simply as labor market participation, who is actually working in the formal economy.
Okay, so health, empowerment, and economics. Before we look at Spain's performance, let's check the global temperature again. Are things improving for women worldwide?
The global data shows a slow, hard-fought twilight of extreme gender inequality.
Slow being the key word there.
Very slow. The global GII score dropped from 0.582 in 1993 down to 0.455 in 2023.
And just to clarify, because this is an index measuring inequality, a lower number is better, right?
Yes, exactly. Lower is better.
And the report highlights some pretty massive victories within those global numbers, like the maternal mortality ratio, the MMR.
Which tracks how many women die from pregnancy-related causes per 100,000 live births.
Right. In 1990, the global MMR was 365.13, but by 2023, it dropped to 216.0.
That is a staggering achievement. It represents hundreds of thousands of mothers surviving childbirth who previously would not have.
It's an incredible win for humanity.
It really is. It reflects a massive global rollout of basic sanitation, prenatal care, and emergency obstetric medicine.
And if we look at the empowerment dimension globally, the female share of parliament seats climbed from just 11.5% in 1990 to 26.5% today.
So roughly a quarter of the world's political decisions are now being made by women.
Right. I mean, it's certainly better than 11%, but it's still glaringly far from true parity.
Far from it, yes.
So what does this all mean for Spain? Let's bring the focus back to our case study. While they sit at 28th globally in overall human development, their GII rank is wildly different, isn't it?
Oh, it's a completely different map. When you filter the world through the lens of gender equality, Spain rockets up the leaderboard to 15th in the world.
15th.
Yes, they possess a remarkably low GII score of 0.043.
Wow.
This is what the report refers to as Spain's quiet revolution.
I really want to understand the mechanics of this revolution. Let's look at that political empowerment metric. You said globally, female representation in parliament is 26.5%. Where does Spain sit?
Spanish women currently hold 43.6% of parliament seats.
43.6%. They are completely dwarfing the global average.
They are. Female decision-making power is truly leading the development there.
I have to imagine that fundamentally changes the DNA of the country.
Absolutely.
When nearly half the people writing the laws, approving the budgets, and setting the national agenda are women, issues that were historically sidelined as, women's issues suddenly become central economic priorities.
Without a doubt.
Like childcare, infrastructure, reproductive health care, family leave. These aren't fringe debates anymore. They are core tenets of national policy.
Precisely. Political power acts as the engine for broader social transformation. And to truly appreciate this, you have to remember the historical context here.
Right, Spain's history.
In 1990, Spain was only 15 years removed from the end of the Franco dictatorship.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that timeline.
Yeah, that was an era characterized by deeply entrenched, legally enforced patriarchal norms where women's rights were severely restricted.
So they went from that to nearly half the parliament in just a few decades.
Exactly. The rapid transition to a near-parity parliament of 43.6% in such a short time is a monumental cultural and structural shift.
That historical context makes the data even more incredible, and you can actually see the ripple effects of that political power in the education data.
The education data is fascinating.
This is honestly my favorite visualization in the entire report. It's a simple line chart tracking the mean years of schooling for men and women in Spain.
Right. In 1990, Spanish women had an average of just 5.43 years of schooling, basically an elementary school education.
Which ties right back to that Franco-era history.
Exactly. But by 2023, that number had doubled to 10.69 years.
A massive leap.
But that's just looking backward. When you look at the projection for the future, the expected years of schooling for kids entering the system today, the lines actually cross over.
Yes, the crossover point is a critical milestone. Today, girls in Spain are projected to complete 17.5 years of education,
17.5 years.
which formally surpasses boys, who are projected to complete 17.19 years.
Wow.
The data indicates this crossover point where female educational attainment officially overtook male attainment occurred around the year 2005.
So in a single generation, women went from having roughly half the education of men to completely overtaking them in their academic system.
It's a stunning reversal.
And this dominance extends into the health metrics as well, right?
Yeah.
The health outcomes are nothing short of miraculous when juxtaposed against the global baseline. Today, Spanish women enjoy a life expectancy of 86.3 years.
86.3. And the men?
Spanish men are at 80.9.
Okay, so women are living significantly longer.
Yes, but the most striking figure is that maternal mortality ratio we discussed earlier.
Right, the global average was 216.
Exactly. 216 deaths per 100,000 live births globally. In Spain, that number has been driven down to an astonishingly low 3.44.
3.44, that is as close to biological zero as you can practically get.
It really is.
It implies a healthcare infrastructure that is functioning at the absolute highest level of preventative and emergency care.
Undeniably.
So let's synthesize this. Spanish women are living longer than men.
Yes.
They're staying in the educational system longer than men.
Yes.
And they hold nearly half of the highest political offices in the country.
That is what the data clearly demonstrates.
Okay, wait, hold on.
What's wrong?
If Spanish women are living longer, they are significantly more educated than men, and they wield nearly equal political power, the mathematical logic dictates they must be out-earning men, right? The economic reality has to reflect this overwhelming advantage in education and health. So are they making more money?
And here we hit the lingering shadow.
Uh-oh.
The most stubborn friction point in human development. The answer is unequivocally no.
Wait, really?
Yes. In 2023, the gross national income per capita for Spanish men was roughly $54,633.
Okay. 54K for men.
For Spanish women, it was approximately $37,690.
Wow. I have to admit, seeing those numbers next to each other is just jarring. Women are substantially more educated, yet they are earning roughly 30% less.
Exactly. Their income is only 69% of what men make.
This raises an important question. How does such a severe asymmetry between education and income persist?
It's the great paradox of modern development.
Seriously, how is that possible? How can a society successfully engineer near-perfect equality in health, politics, and education, but fail so spectacularly in the economic arena? Are Spanish corporations just blatantly cutting paychecks for women that are 30% smaller for the exact same job?
Well, while overt discrimination certainly still exists, the structural reality is far more complex and, honestly, much more insidious.
Okay, explain that to me.
The report points to deeply rooted mechanics of the labor market that education alone simply cannot overwrite. We have to look at two specific phenomena here. First is occupational segregation.
Meaning men and women are being funneled into different types of jobs entirely.
Exactly. Even as women surpass men in higher education, they remain heavily clustered in sectors that society historically undervalues and underpays.
Like what?
Fields like early childhood education, nursing, social work, and the humanities. Men, meanwhile, continue to disproportionately dominate STEM fields, corporate finance, and engineering.
Which are the sectors that the modern economy rewards with massive wage premiums?
Precisely. A woman might hold a master's degree in social care, while a man hold a bachelor's degree in software engineering, and the market will systematically reward the software engineer with double the lifetime earnings.
That is so frustrating.
It is. Education doesn't fix the wage gap if the economy stubbornly refuses to value the work women are primarily educated to do.
That makes perfect, frustrating sense. And what's the second phenomenon keeping that gap so wide?
The second is the profound economic impact of unpaid care work. It's often referred to as the motherhood penalty.
The motherhood penalty.
Yes. Despite Spain's immense political progress, Spanish women, like women globally, really continue to shoulder the vast majority of unpaid domestic labor, elder care, and childcare.
Ah, right. Because society just expects the mother to be the default caregiver when a child is sick or an aging parent needs help.
Precisely. And the labor market is aggressively designed to punish that reality.
Because you can't be at the office if you're taking care of a sick kid.
Right. Because women bear the brunt of that unpaid care, they are far more likely to require part-time work or to step away from the workforce entirely during their peak earning years.
Or pass up promotions that demand rigid, inflexible hours.
Exactly. The corporate ladder is generally designed for someone who has a spouse at home managing the rest of life.
Wow.
Interestingly, sociologists note that men often experience the inverse.
What, a fatherhood bonus?
Exactly, a fatherhood bonus where becoming a parent actually correlates with higher wages for men, as employers subconsciously perceive them as more stable and motivated breadwinners.
So the very architecture of how we define and reward work is fundamentally flawed. It penalizes the biological and social realities of caregiving.
Really does.
That 69% figure is just a sobering reality check.
Yeah.
It shows us the exact frontier of human development. We've cracked the code on extending life, we democratize education, but dismantling the structural economic gap is the ultimate hurdle.
Indeed. But taking a step back, when we look at the totality of these metrics, health, education, income, and distribution, we have firmly established that humanity is moving forward.
Yes, the numbers are undeniably going up.
And Spain is executing this progress with remarkable efficiency and fairness. But this brings us to the most vital pivot of our entire analysis today.
Right. At what cost?
Exactly. At what cost?
This is the core of the mystery we set up at the very beginning. We are now arriving at the fourth gear, the PHDI.
The Planetary Pressures Adjusted Human Development Index.
Right, because everything we've talked about so far, the standard HDI, the inequality adjustments, the gender metrics, they all essentially measure how fast the human car is driving down the highway of progress.
Right.
Well, the PHDI does something radically different. It stops looking at the speedometer and looks directly at the exhaust pipe.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
Hmm.
The PHDI introduces the critical concept of toxic growth.
Toxic growth.
Yes. It modifies a nation's standard HDI score by mathematically factoring in its carbon dioxide emissions per capita and its material footprint per capita.
Okay.
It is specifically designed to penalize countries that achieve high human development by plundering the Earth's resources, polluting the atmosphere, and exporting their ecological damage to poorer nations.
Let's break down that term material footprint really quickly, because I think people usually just imagine like plastic straws or recycling bins when they hear that.
Oh, it's so much bigger than that.
Right.
A material footprint measures the total amount of raw materials extracted globally to meet the final consumption demands of a country.
So we're talking about massive scale.
Yes, we are talking about millions of tons of concrete for highways, steel for skyscrapers, rare earth metals mined for smartphones and electric vehicle batteries, timber, agricultural biomass, all of it.
Wow.
If a country is building its wealth by aggressively consuming the physical mass of the planet, its material footprint will be massive.
So if your economy is booming and your citizens are rich, but you achieved it by chopping down every forest, burning coal relentlessly, and importing endless consumer goods, the PHDI calls you out.
It absolutely calls you out.
So what happens when we apply this planetary stress test to the global HDI score?
The global cost is severe. When the planetary pressure test is applied, global human development drops by a staggering 10.05%.
Wow, a full 10% drop.
It is the statistical proof of our greatest modern failing.
Yeah.
It demonstrates mathematically that a massive portion of our recent historical progress hasn't actually been generated through true innovation. It has been borrowed from the Earth.
We're just pulling from a bank account we can't replenish.
Exactly. It's an ecological debt we are racking up at alarming speed. It is the very definition of toxic growth.
And this brings us back to the giant red question mark from the beginning of our deep dive.
Yes, the big reveal.
The absolute magic trick of this entire UN report. Let's look at the global leaderboard again. Spain ranks an unassuming 28th in standard HDI.
Well.
But when you apply the PHDI, when you penalize nations for their toxic growth, almost all of the traditional wealthy, hyper-industrialized superpowers that sit in the top 10 absolutely plummet down the rankings.
Because their carbon emissions and material consumption are completely unsustainable.
Right. They are incredibly rich, but they are incredibly toxic. But Spain. Spain shoots like a rocket to global rank number 2.
Number 2 in the world.
It's unbelievable. It's like a brutal grading curve in a college class. Everyone else in the class got a 0 on the final project because they blatantly plagiarized from nature. So the one student who actually did the reading, put in the honest work, and followed the rules gets bumped all the way up to an A+ rank.
That's a great analogy.
How on earth did Spain actually pull this off?
The mechanics behind this unprecedented leap revolve around a crucial economic and environmental concept known as decoupling.
Decoupling. Okay, unpack that for me.
Historically, ever since the Industrial Revolution, human prosperity and ecological destruction were completely coupled together.
They were linked.
Completely. The two lines on the graph moved in lockstep. The only way a country got richer, built better hospitals, and educated more citizens was by burning more fossil fuels, extracting more coal, and consuming more raw materials.
Wealth literally required pollution.
Right. More money invariably meant more smog in the air and more holes in the ground.
Okay, so how did Spain break that rule?
They managed to sever that historical link. They have decoupled their progress from planetary destruction. Let's look at the specific mechanism of their CO2 emissions.
Okay, let's look at the numbers.
Around the year 2005, Spain's emissions peaked at roughly 8.43 tons of CO2 per capita.
8.43 tons.
Right. But instead of allowing those emissions to continue climbing as their economy grew, they implemented aggressive systemic changes. By the most recent data in the report, they have slashed their emissions down to 4.66 tons per capita.
Wait, 4.66 tons? Isn't the global average hovering right around 4.54?
Precisely. Spain's per capita emissions are essentially on par with the global average.
But their living standards are way higher.
Exactly. Their 86-year life expectancies, their massive educational attainment, their world-class healthcare, they are vastly higher than the global average, but their emissions are the same.
That's incredible.
And they have also maintained a remarkably lower material footprint relative to other high-income nations.
Okay, this is where I really need to know the how. How does a modern, thriving European economy drastically lower its carbon and material footprint without plunging its citizens back into the Stone Age?
It's a great question.
Did they just ban cars and force everyone to turn off their air conditioning?
No, it wasn't about deprivation. It was about intelligent structural design and really aggressive policy shifts.
Okay.
First, consider energy. Spain possesses distinct geographic advantages, abundant sunlight and wind, and they leaned into them heavily.
Oh, right. Solar and wind.
Massive early investments in renewable energy grids. They aggressively replaced coal and fossil fuel generation with solar and wind power. This fundamentally changes the carbon intensity of every single light switch flipped on in the country.
So the underlying energy grid itself was cleaned up.
Yes.
What about their physical infrastructure? Because the report mentioned their material footprint is surprisingly low.
This is deeply tied to urban planning and cultural norms. Spain has a deeply ingrained culture of high-density urban living.
Ah.
Instead of the sprawling, car-dependent suburbs you see in the U.S. or Australia, a massive percentage of the Spanish population lives in mid-rise apartment buildings in highly walkable city centers.
Oh, let me infer the math on that. If a family is living in a fourth-floor apartment in Madrid, they aren't heating and cooling a 3,000-square-foot standalone house with 4 exposed walls and a roof.
Exactly. They are sharing the thermal efficiency of the building.
And if they can walk to the grocery store or the pharmacy, they aren't burning gasoline for every single daily errand.
Precisely. The architecture and city layout inherently enforce a low material footprint. You require less concrete per person to build housing, less asphalt to build roads, and vastly less energy to maintain daily life.
That makes so much sense.
And combine this density with their extensive, highly efficient, high-speed rail network.
The AVE system.
Oh, right, the trains.
Which successfully replaces millions of highly polluting short-haul domestic flights and long car journeys. You begin to see the mechanical blueprint of their decoupling.
What's so inspiring about this is that it isn't theoretical.
Yeah.
Spain proves conclusively with hard data that you do not need to pillage the earth to achieve an incredibly high quality of life.
No, you really don't.
You don't need to live in a mud hut to save the planet, and you don't need to destroy the planet to live in a modern, healthy, highly educated society. Spain found the exact sweet spot.
They are the living, breathing proof of concept for a sustainable future.
Which leads us perfectly to the final phase of our analysis. Synthesizing a playbook for the future. We've solved the mystery of Spain's 28th to 2nd ranking. We see the mechanics of how they decoupled growth from destruction.
Right.
Now, the critical question is, What counterintuitive truths does the Spanish model teach the rest of the global community? Let's build that playbook based on the data we've covered today. I think that's a great idea.
Because I see three core principles emerging from this report that completely reframe how we should think about progress.
Let's outline them. What is the first principle?
The first principle is that equity is efficiency.
Equity is efficiency. I like that.
Spain's low inequality loss of 10.7% proves that when you distribute health, education, and income broadly through strong social safety nets, a nation becomes structurally sound.
Yes.
Inequality is essentially a massive inefficiency that drags down a nation's true potential. If your society is highly unequal, it is fragile.
A very astute framing. And the second principle?
The second principle revolves around gender. The data shows that empowering women isn't just about checking a diversity box. It is the ultimate engine for structural transformation.
Absolutely.
When Spanish women crossed over in education and took nearly half the parliament seats, they altered the trajectory of the entire country. You cannot maximize human development if you are systematically holding back half of your human capital.
And that leads directly to the third and perhaps most vital principle. Planetary resilience is the new hard currency.
Say more about that.
The era of evaluating nations based purely on GDP or standard HDI is over.
It's totally obsolete.
The old metrics are obsolete because they ignore the cost of toxic growth. Moving forward, the true measure of a nation's success will be its ability to thrive without cannibalizing the Earth's resources. If your growth is destroying the planet, it isn't progress, it's just delayed collapse.
So if Spain wants to actually hit #1 globally, and if other nations want to catch up to this new paradigm, the to-do list is crystal clear.
It is.
We have to dismantle the structural barriers that keep that gender wage gap stuck at 69%.
Yes.
We have to completely rethink how society values and compensates care work. And crucially, we must aggressively accelerate the decoupling process, building denser cities, expanding high-speed transit, and completely transitioning to renewable grids.
To summarize the ultimate lesson from Spain's remarkable leap, true human progress is not about artificially inflating the present by plundering the future.
That's a great way to put it.
It is about learning to live in complex symbiosis with the Earth. The Spanish model proves that human flourishing and ecological balance are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
They are, in fact, entirely dependent on one another for long-term survival.
I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener. We spent a lot of time today talking about vast global averages, multi-decade trends, and entire national infrastructures.
Big macro concept.
Right. But you can apply this exact same multidimensional lens to the micro level of your own life. Think about the industry you work in, the company you work for, or the community you live in.
That's a really good point.
Are the organizations around you just blindly chasing raw volume and revenue like the old, outdated HDI? Or are they calculating the true planetary cost of their actions, the PHDI?
Right. Who is paying the price for that growth?
Exactly. And when growth happens, who is structurally left behind? Are you helping to build a system that hoards progress or one that distributes it?
It's a powerful framework for evaluating not just nations, but literally any system of human organization. It demands a much higher level of holistic accountability.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought to leave you with today. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how countries are ranked by these complex UN indices.
Right.
But what if we brought that math down to the individual level? What if we applied the Planetary Pressures Adjusted Index to ourselves?
Oh, wow. A personal PHDI.
Imagine if you had a personal PHDI score, a metric that took your financial success, your education, and your health, and then aggressively subtracted your personal carbon footprint, your material consumption, and the negative impact you have on the people around you.
That is a terrifying but necessary thought experiment.
Right. If that score were broadcast to the world, would your ranking suddenly jump to the top tier like Spain? Or would you plummet down the leaderboard? In a world that is utterly obsessed with measuring the sheer volume of our growth, maybe it's time we all start taking a much closer look at the shadow that our growth casts.
A truly profound metric to consider for the future.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the dimensions and shadows of human development. We hope this exploration gave you a completely new set of tools to analyze the world around you, and perhaps a little bit of optimism that a better, more balanced future is actually mechanically possible. We will be back soon to unpack more unexpected insights. Until then, keep questioning the leaderboards.